Okay, first up is Craig. Yeah, I think it's a really great reference. I think everything's clear, except at the end, I didn't quite get it. That doesn't look like real recoil from a gun, and maybe it's not supposed to be real, but it looks a little too. I don't know, like trying to get through the motions as quickly as possible rather than kind of really reacting to the movement of the gun. And then I don't exactly even I think it's really kind of funny, but I don't really get what's happening here. Let's take a look at the animation. Yeah, it's the same here. I didn't quite get what's happening, and I guess he's not doing the firing of the gun thing anymore. So yeah, I think that's where it needs a little work. Is this? I think up to here things are pretty clear, and then at the end I wasn't really quite getting it. Although it is again a pretty funny pose. Just want to take a look in the Maya file. Okay, good. You are using IK arms. That seems very abrupt. That moving the chair back that fast. But you can always adjust the timing afterwards. But right now that looks pretty quick. And one thing to look out. This is something I always say to look out for is you can't move both feet at the same time. One foot needs to remain planted while the other one moves. Otherwise, it looks like he's sort of slipping and sliding around. The other thing is you haven't really getting from here to here. You're going to need a couple more poses. I think you need maybe a couple steps there, or I mean, you could potentially jump out of the chair, but then you would need kind of a jump, middle of a jump pose. So might spend a little more time on that. But really great progress. This is really good work. Really, I can tell each of the poses was very thoughtfully done. I mean, you notice stuff like, each pose, the fingers are carefully done, and um, and there's a lot going on here. So you're doing a really good job. Okay, this is Flora. Yeah, I think it's a good performance. It might have been better to do a bit of a wider shot just because you're cropping off so much of the action that it doesn't give you the full information. And one thing to know is when you're animating, even if you're not going to see something like, let's say, the hips or the legs in the shot, it can still be nice to see what they were doing because it just sort of helps kind of explain the rest of the pose, and getting the things like the hips and legs placed right help the rest of the pose look right, even if it's off camera sometimes. And then another just general tip for video is that if at all possible, like I would have tried to shoot this from the opposite angle where I'm using the light coming in from the window to light the characters, whereas now, because you're pointing the camera towards the light, it's kind of silhouetting the character. So, just try to angle the camera to where the most light is hitting the subject, particularly when you're trying to do a reference video. Here's Flora's animation. Looks a bit different from what was happening in the video. One thing I'm making sure you're doing, the hands and the wrists on. So, this first pose I think is really nice. Seems real thoughtful. And then that one maybe a little less so. And it's not really clear. Like, this hand should remain planted. I have a feeling you need to switch to IKA hands. And then here you really want to think about the wrists and fingers because those are looking kind of awkward. And then I don't quite know what happens here with that kind of dip down and bounce up. And then the end pose again is nice. So I think there's just a lot of poses in the middle that need more work. Okay, here we are in the Maya file. Yeah, and I can see right away that you're going to probably want to switch at least this arm to IK. So to do that, I would delete, and it does mean redoing the arm animation, unfortunately. But let's go to say here, and I'm going to change that to 10, and move this into position. Let's take a look at what's happening here. Then we need to adjust the, is it this guy? Nope. Where's the one for the arm? Not that one. Might need this to find it. Yeah. Just get that elbow in the right position. And keyframe those. And then the point of this, I'll just put this same, I'll just middle mouse click here to get those to stick. That's the idea of what I'm trying to get at, and she moved away too much all at once to do this, is oh boy, that wasn't very good, was it? Let's kind of do a better pose here. Mine just crashed on me, so hoping with this like lower quality view it won't happen again. But again, the point here was to delete the keyframes on the IKFK blend unless you're switching it, and then move this into position here. Just obviously put more time into it than I'm doing right now, but so I'll keyframe those two, and then the idea is that I'm going to try to select all and see if it'll let me switch to spline so we can see what's really happening here. Tangent, spline, and I'm going to, with this and this selected, so that's keyframe there, and a middle mouse click here to change the frame without changing the position. And what you'll see is, why is that not sticking? That should be sticking. Let me just change these to tangents to yeah, instead of spline it should be clamped, or auto is probably going to work better. There we go. So see what's happening here? This is the whole point of the story, is that now with that hand planted, it really looks like she's pushing herself up. But if you're using FK, that's next to impossible. So any hand that's going to end up needing to be planted is going to have to be switched to IK, which unfortunately means redoing any other animation with it. Now you can, after she pushes up, you can do something like this. You can say, okay, well let's, between here and here, I can keyframe this, and let's say between here and say here, I'm changing that to 0 now. I've got my auto keyframe on. So it transitions from being IK to FK again, and then you have all your FK poses back, and as long as she doesn't need to plant her hand on anything, rest her hand on anything, you're fine to do FK the rest of the time. But I think you'll find that, I'm just going to go a little closer, that this is important to make it look like, she's really lifting herself up. She needs some leverage. Yeah, and then I kind of don't get what's happening with these. Just switch to shaded view. Might be easier to see at this point. I don't really get what's happening with these poses here. Maybe you could kind of fill us in a little bit. Looks like is she doing some kind of spell on there? I don't know. Maybe need a couple poses. Let's see what's happening with the feet. This looks like you more or less got the right idea, but you really need to keep one foot planted while the other one's moving. So, for example, yeah, let's say like this one. Yeah, see, if this one's up in the air, I'm just going to middle mouse click here instead of keyframe on that one. This one should stay planted. Let me just make sure these are on auto. I should have done auto instead of spline. Okay. Now the reason it's moving now is just that it's overextended. The root is just too high for the foot. See that? And then there we go. So see how it's better when that foot's planted, and then this one, and I'll middle mouse click here and S. This one will be planted between these two. Again, let's change it to auto tangents. See that? And then, and then just keep alternating. One's still while the other one's moving, but don't have them both moving at the same time, or it'll look like she's sort of ice skating. But yeah, a good start. I think more on the, I think a lot more kind of wrists and fingers going on with that, whatever she's doing with her magic spell thing. Okay, here's Taylor. It's a funny reference. I think the camera maybe jumps around a little bit too much, but it's alright. I don't really get the ending. Like, I understand that there's no batteries in the remote, and that reveals what the problem was, but I don't. Does the character just suddenly pass out or die? Or I didn't really quite get the ending. Maybe you could fill us in a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of. I can see you got into doing the reference, and I think it could, it could be a good reference for you. Unfortunately, your animation didn't seem to work. There's no attachment here, so please try reposting that. Okay, this is Jeffrey. Okay, so yeah, I think it's an interesting reference. I mean, it's a bit long at 26 seconds, but you can always just choose a portion from that. But just well shot, very clear for seeing the action and all that, and good performance. Okay, and here's the first video. Good. Here's the second camera for Jeffrey. I think that there's actually too many camera cuts in this. I think this is a good point of view. This one's okay up until maybe here when he's starting to crowd the right side of the frame, and then certainly when he's walking out the frame. I think you should cut out of that one sooner. This one now we're seeing from the back, and I'm not sure I like that. But then again, it cuts very quickly to here and then to there, and then it's just too many cuts. Where interestingly, the much simpler one showed the action better than the one with all these cuts. So I don't want to scare you away from doing camera cuts. I think it's fine to do that. I just think you need to do, you know, just a few shots. I also think the piece in general, you know, at least for this class, you should try to just do a portion of this. I would say maybe the last step or two, and then the slicing, because that's where the action is. But this long, long lead up is just a lot of time to animate. So, okay, just kind of checking this out in Maya. Yeah, it looks like you're doing this right. Not too sure about this. I think you definitely are going to need another pose in here. We've got this one. Well, there's no kind of like anticipation pose. I think he needs to kind of wind up before he slices forward. So, you know, have that hand move in the opposite direction before he swings forward. I mean, I know it's a little bit, we're surprised he's chopping that because he looked like kind of, you know, he was sort of weak or something in his walk, very slow. But I still think even at least a little bit of a wind up would really help with that. But I think, you know, you're done really well. You've done a hell of a lot of poses. I just think you should kind of trim it down so you can just really focus in on the important parts. But yeah, good work on this. You mentioned problem editing the timing of the animation, and one thing that I recommend at this early stage is to have everything keyframed on every pose, so it's easier to change the timing. Because look at this now, like look at all the keyframes on this, and then look at all the keyframes on this, and so you've already broken it up where you don't. And look at all the keyframes on that. You just so because you don't have everything every pose, it makes it really hard to adjust the timing, because if you start moving stuff around, it's going to break up the poses. So I might check, like, it's sort of tricky, but I mean, you still should be able to change the timing. But I guess what the other thing is, I guess if everything is at least done at the beginning and at the end, you could adjust the timing overall. So for example, let's make sure we've select all here and S, and then go here. And you could just go through, like, go to next keyframe S, next keyframe S, next, do for each of those, and then to make sure that they each have, but I'm just making sure the beginning and the end have all of that. And then I think if I hold down Shift and click and drag, and for example, I change it, hold down Shift, click and drag, and then I should be able to grab this little yellow thing here, and I could scale the timing of the animation down. Yeah, I think all the animation is the same, except it's just faster. So it's a little hard to know what you ran into in the graph editor, but my guess is that you're moving the timing of some body parts without moving the timing of the other body parts, and that is where you tend to run into issues. So generally, if you're moving stuff around, make sure that everything's keyframed at least at the beginning and the end, and that you're selecting all and adjusting all. Because as soon as you start sliding some things and not others, your poses get pulled apart. So I'm guessing that's the problem we ran into, but without knowing exactly what's been happening too, I can't really say. Also, if you do this scale thing, you should then double click and go to keys. No, it's not keys. Oh, snap, just snap. And make sure they're all on whole number keyframes again after you scale. Okay, this is a Danya's reference. Yeah, I think it's all right. I think one thing is, just a general tip is to try not to point the camera into the light. It'd be better, if you flip things around and that light was illuminating the character rather than, kind of blowing out, giving you like a lens flare. Um, I think it's okay. It feels a little bit kind of a little bit rigid and stiff and not. It doesn't have to be realistic, but it just seems like uh, almost sort of too posed to pose, sort of self-consciously posed to pose in the performance. The other thing is, it's nice to get like a full body shot because even if you're not seeing the legs and the hips and stuff in the final shot, sometimes that can really help inform the poses if you know how those should be because, it can affect the rest of the character and kind of make sense of the movement. So I tend to like reference that shows the full body unless you're really, really sure, unless it's really a close-up shot. It's just nice to have all that information. Okay, this is the Danya's animation. It's interesting, the body's in step tangent, the fingers aren't. You might want to fix that. One thing I'm noticing in these poses is there's really, and I understand that you're coming from your reference, but there's really nothing going on with the legs or the hips, and you might want to just, even if it wasn't in the reference, add some kind of weight shifting or maybe take a small step forward or back. Also, really besides the weirdness that's happening to the fingers, pay attention to the finger poses because it's the hand looks odd there and there's nothing going on there. So yeah, right now at least you got to get the root moving, even if it's just shifting the weight a little bit. And I think actually, if you looked really closely at your reference, you would see that the root moves a little bit more than it does in this animation. So what becomes obvious in this animation is that you really need holds, which I think we go over next module. So you definitely need to put some holds in there to kind of like hit a pose, hold it, hit a pose, hold it, and yeah. So I think get some more weight shifts, get a little bit more going on there. You might want to, if you're gonna, you can start in a wider shot like this, but maybe then you want to push in the camera for a second shot that's a little closer, just because it seems wide, for the action that's happening in this shot. And it might be nice to be closer to see what's really going on with the character. Hey, this is Katherine. There's one. Okay. I think either of those could work. Maybe there's kind of more of an opportunity for something to happen in that grabbing the book, and I would just think try to give it like a sort of a point or an emotion to it. Right now, it feels a little bit too like there's not like give it a more of a point. Something happens, maybe a tiny little conflict or something. It just seems a bit straightforward now. Um, so, uh, I don't know. Maybe try to show some emotion with the character, or you could have some action happen. Like you mentioned something about trying to reach for the book. I thought that might be interesting, or maybe in the trying to grab one book, another one gets knocked over, and the character reacts. Or it just might be nice to have something a little more emotion or action in there. But the footage itself is well shot. Okay, here's Catherine's animation. All right. Well, I love that you got the robot in there. That's funny. So, I don't know how we're getting from here to here. It seems like there's a heck of a lot of poses missing. And just generally, I look at this pose and there's a lot missing. Like it doesn't. It looks a little stiff. And also, like never do this where it's just the one control moving. The spinal twist, the headal tilt, the rootal move. The root always moves in every pose, with very few exceptions. So never just move one or two controls like that. You always want to move all the controls on the body and really shape each pose. So, and also it's like right now, if you look at the feet, it's just they're both sliding back together. So she can lift a foot and take a step back and a step back, but I think you just need to really take some more time on these poses and craft each pose, and also think about how you get from one pose to the next, and kind of break it down a little bit more. You don't have to do this walk. In fact, I think it'd be better if you could just start here, take a step towards the shelf or half a step or whatever, and do this action really carefully. But I just think you need to kind of lovingly craft each of those poses. And right now, you're missing a lot of detail. So keep working on that.